Watching the press preview, first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the commentator for the Mail on Sunday, Dan Hodges, and the writer, Ellie Mae O'Hagan. So let's see what's on some of those front pages. The Sunday Times leads with claims of a major cover-up in the SAS amid allegations a rogue unit killed unarmed Afghan civilians. Senior Tories are demanding more state funding from the Prime Minister for NHS workers in schools. That's according to The Observer. The Mail on Sunday reports Theresa May is considering a U-turn on tuition fees to woo young voters. The Sunday Express reports British fishermen will have exclusive rights to a 12-mile zone around the coast in post-Brexit plans. The Sunday Telegraph says business leaders have been told the PM may walk out of Brexit talks over the EU divorce bill. And the Star on Sunday has the latest on Love Island stars facing the boot. Well, I'm joined now by Dan Hodges and Ellie Mae O'Hagan. Very good evening to you both. Many thanks for joining us on this show. Let's start with the front page of the Sunday Times. Insight investigation. Headline, rogue SAS unit accused of executing civilians. Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible story by the Insight team. I mean, it's an incredible story and a deeply disturbing story in which it alleges that the SAS have effectively been running a sort of a death squad in Afghanistan, involving, I think it seems to say, up to as many as 52 alleged killings of innocent civilians who according to the reports and the allegations, have essentially been murdered by what is being described as a rogue unit. Now, as I say, I mean, this is obviously going to be the subject of, well, obviously very intense media speculation after this, and obviously a full investigation, I would have thought. I mean, the one thing I would say is obviously we have had a number of incidences recently, very high-profile incidents, of where members of the armed forces were accused of very, very serious crimes in both Afghanistan, I think, and in Iraq. And ultimately, many of those allegations are ultimately shown to be baseless. But obviously, as it stands, that's a very, very serious allegation indeed. A very serious allegation, Ellie. A lot of questions that need to be answered. Well, yeah, I mean, this is, I hate to use the word again, really serious stuff. You know, when people go to war, they go to war in our name, you know. They're supposed to be enacting the wishes of the British state. And, you know, if allegations come up like... I can't speak tonight. If allegations like this come up, then they need to be investigated thoroughly, and also I think there needs to be as much public disclosure as possible. People need to know what's going on. Yeah, we have had a statement from the MOD. A spokesman sent us this, saying that the Royal Military Police has found no evidence of criminal behaviour by the armed forces in Afghanistan. They've discontinued over 90% of the 675 allegations made, and less than 10 investigations remain. It goes on to say, our military served with great courage and professionalism, and we proudly hold them to the highest standards. Where allegations are raised, it is right they are investigated. So they are saying that where allegations are made, it is right that they are investigated, but they are also underlying that notion that the military served with great courage and professionalism in Afghanistan, something that most of us wouldn't disagree with. Absolutely. I mean, and I think this is one of the things that's going to be most shocking about this story, is that this doesn't, you know, on the surface, this is not just supposed to be a couple of a couple of individual squaddies who basically lost their heads in extreme circumstances. I mean, this is, firstly, seems to, the allegation is it's almost a systematic sort of program that was being conducted, and also this is, you know, this is the most elite regiment in the British Army that's being accused of this. So, I mean, I have to say, my initial response is, I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm certainly not saying that the Sunday Times story is wrong, but I find it, you know, incredible to believe that this was going on. But obviously, we're going to have to wait for the culmination of whatever inquiries move forward. And it's probably worth highlighting again that the MOD has denied any sort of criminal activity carried out by these soldiers. So interesting story there on the front page of the Times. OK, let's move on to the Mail page 17. A story that's not going away anytime soon, rightly so, Grenfell Tower and the fallout from that. Yeah, this is a story in the Mail about apparently the fire consultant that was hired by the Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation
actually advised the council not to tell anybody about the fire risks so that they wouldn't actually have to enact any of the kind of measures that they might have to keep the building safe. Actually, when you come to Sky Studios, this is the first night that I've come here since doing the papers where it's been light enough to see, you drive past the tower, and it's just nothing prepared. None of the pictures in the media prepare you for the full horror of what it looks like. It's a skeleton of a building. It's just horrendous to see. And I think what this story shows is that there were just so many people who let down the residents of this tower. You know, as we know today, the head of Kensington and Chelsea Council has resigned. But I feel disappointed that he didn't even have the good grace to really take responsibility. He just talked of perceived failings, when it's not just perceived failings. There are obvious failings here. If there weren't obvious failings, this never would have happened. This should never have happened. And this story is just one in another long line of disgraceful stories to come out.
Yeah, I mean, there have been 3 scalps taken. We've got the head of the council, the deputy and the chief executive who stepped aside a few days ago. Ultimately, when the dust has finally settled all of this, Dan, do you see the victims getting the outcome that they are hoping for?
Well, I mean, you know, with something on this scale, I mean, I don't really see how the victims and their families can ever properly get the sort of recompense that's due them with something as horrific as this. I mean, what I would say is, though, I mean, I do think we are. I mean, I think this is an excellent story by Mark Nicol and Jonathan Bucks. But I mean, I think what we're starting to see now, we are. You know, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of rumour. In the days immediately after the fire, but what we're now starting to see is people actually properly digging down now and actually looking into what actually underpinned this. Obviously, we've got the main investigation that's going to be conducted. But one of the themes that I think is already emerging is the regulatory environment around sort of planning regulation, housing regulation, fire safety regulation. Appears to have been just basically a complete and utter shambles.
And it's a failure of successive governments as well.
I mean, I've actually written about this tomorrow. I mean, one of the things that I'm deeply concerned about in the way that this tragedy has been politicised in a party political sense. I mean, obviously everything is political in one sense, and I am very concerned about the way it's been.
But it is also factual that the residents did try to bring legal proceedings about the fire risk, and they couldn't do it because of cuts to legal aid. That is a fact. You know, spending cuts have contributed to this. The residents say that themselves. And with regard to the idea of there being, you know, conspiracy theory, I think that conspiracy theory is what people resort to when there isn't transparency. And I don't think there's been transparency over this.
Well, no, but I mean, in certain instances, I mean, there has been conspiracy theory. So if you remember at the beginning, we were told that the cladding had specifically been put on this building. This type of cladding had specifically been put on this building because the Conservative Council didn't want an ugly tower block being seen by rich residents in their borough. We've now seen, and we continue to see every day, that this type of cladding, or certainly dangerous cladding of a similar nature, has been installed by councils of all different persuasions across the country. I mean, in terms of the conspiracies, I mean, we had, frankly, the completely reckless allegation by David Lammy earlier this week that the police and the fire services and other authorities were in some way deliberately covering up the death toll. Now that is ridiculous. Conspiracy and scaremongering. And what I'm saying is, and you can contrast that with this story, which is showing that there are very, very clearly very, very serious regulatory failings. And this is the sort of thing in relation to Grenfell that we now need to be focusing on. We need to push aside these ridiculous conspiracies, and we now need to start focusing on the facts, because if we don't focus on the facts, then it's going to happen again.
I mean, I think David Lammy has been actually excellent on Grenfell. He's really spoken on behalf of the residents.
He's very passionate.
Yeah, and I think he's been great. And what I would say about conspiracy theories is exactly what I said earlier, which is people start to believe conspiracy theories about the authorities when the authorities aren't doing their jobs properly and they're not being transparent enough. Like, we know already this week that the council were due to hold a meeting. They tried to ban local residents from it, and then they tried to ban the press from it. And when the press managed to legally get their way in, they cancelled the meeting. Now, I'm not saying that these conspiracy theories are true. What I am saying is that when the council closes ranks like that, when it isn't transparent and when it isn't open with the people who have suffered in this and the people who are justifiably angry, then they start to think the worst. It's not ridiculous to reach for conspiracy theories. It's the direct result of the shoddy behaviour of this council.
Yeah, well, I guess at all levels there have been calls for transparency, whether it's the Prime Minister, the Mayor of London, local council officials. I think the victims demand it, and they deserve it as well. We're just going to pause momentarily for a break. Do stay with us on the press preview. Still to come, parents face fines if their children are late for school. Do keep watching. Hello there, welcome back to the press preview. Dan and Ellie are still with me. Let's talk about the story on the front page of the Observer. This is about the Prime Minister getting a bit of pressure from senior Conservatives about austerity. Is the age of austerity coming to an end?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
I mean, basically, it's one of the implications of the election results. I mean, speaking to a lot of Tory MPs over the last sort of week or so, I mean, a number of have their own sort of pet theories for why the election result went so badly for them. Obviously, people talk about the manifesto and Theresa May's performance. But one of the things they all come back to is that basically the public are sick of austerity. And I think what's interesting, I mean, we focus on the Observer, but it's across the piece. All the papers have some of this weekend. It's not just the public that's sick of austerity. It's government ministers who are sick of austerity, and they're sick of having to go out week in, week out, trying to defend cuts to their own department. So here we've got Justin Greening is coming out lobbying for education. We've got Jeremy Hunt coming out lobbying for health. Obviously, we've had a lot of focus in the election on police cuts. Yep. I think Damien Green has come out saying we need to look at tuition fees. Yeah. And it's across the piece. Now, the problem for the Tories is this is a place where the politics of the moment, we need to end austerity, and the economics, we're still massively in debt, are starting to collide. And how they get out of this, Theresa May and Philip Hammond, is going to go a long way to determining the course of the next poll. Yeah, I mean,
Ellie, you're a well-known Corbyn fan, Corbyn supporter. We heard from Damien Green a little bit earlier on talking about tuition fees that needs to be addressed in order to win back younger voters. Is that going to be enough for you?
Well, I'm 32, so university's a long time ago for me. I mean, I think, the Labour is setting the policy agenda as far as government spending is concerned at the moment, and I think what Greening was suggesting was to lower the cap. So obviously, if you want to get rid of tuition fees, and that's your aim, and you've got one party saying, well, we'll lower the cap, and then the other one saying, we'll just get rid of them, you're obviously going to vote for the one that's just going to get rid of them. So I don't think this will really help the Tories, and I think that they've got a lot of long-term structural problems that this election has exposed. I think the first is that they've got an ageing voter base, and they're not winning round young voters at all. Everybody below the age of 40 went for Labour this election. Not everybody, I mean the majority that in every age group under 40 went for Labour. They are addicted to negative campaigning. I can't remember the last time there was a positive Tory campaign about what they might offer the country. All of their recent campaigns have been, from Zach Goldsmith's campaign to Ed Miliband to Michael Howard in 2005 and now Theresa May's campaign have been very strongly based on scare tactics about the opponent. So there's lots of long-term, there are husks, fewer than 100,000 members now, lots of long-term problems for the Tories. And yes, the public are justifiably sick of austerity as well. And I think, let's not let Theresa May off the hook here. She has been following through with George Osborne's austerity programme, which has led to more borrowing, not less, which is not what we were promised. So they're in trouble, I think, in the long term.
They are in trouble. OK, just a couple of minutes left, guys. Just want to pick up on this story on page 12 of the Daily Mail. Story regarding the Prime Minister under fire over her relationship with the DUP. Again, something that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, this is a great one, actually, from a colleague, Glenn Owen, about how the DUP leadership, after the sort of negotiations that got the deal done, insisted on being flown back at the actually not at the taxpayers' expense, actually flown back by an RAF jet. And my understanding was the RAF refused to pay for it, so the Conservative Party had to end up footing the bill. But I mean, what it is illustrative of is we are going to be getting these stories every week now. Yeah. The relationship with the DUP and the Conservative Party is something that a lot of people are going to be focusing on. The one thing I would say, though, is we're all laughing now. Week before I was on here, and all the papers were saying Theresa May, she hasn't got the deal sorted. She can't handle the negotiations with the DUP. How's she going to do it with Brexit? Well, she has actually got the deal sorted, so we'll all laugh at it. But she has managed to secure, you know, the deal for the government. So
but at what cost, though?
Well, that's what we're going to say. Well,
that is the
couple
big
of thousand.
Just touch on this story finally, which is in the Times front page. Parents face £60 fines when children are late for school. How much? 60 quid. It's quite a lot, isn't it?
Do you know what,
you don't think this is right?
Well, we were having an argument. We picked this one because we started arguing about it in the green room. Because I hope you don't mind me. Dan's got kids and I don't, and so you'd think that he'd be the one that would be saying, "Oh, 60 quid," but actually, he.
This is one of those sayings I sort of, you know, I'm probably giving myself a fine here. You know, look, we all deliver the kids late at occasions. We've all done it. But if you do it consistently, then frankly, you're not doing your job as a parent. Because part of your job as a parent is to make sure your child goes to school and goes to school on time.
But what if there are problems in the home that mean that you can't get your children to school on time? Then how does fining a parent, if you
can give good reasons, though, sure, there's extenuating circumstances.
Well, it doesn't say that. I mean, I hope so. It doesn't say that in the article. I just think, you know, if there's a parent who's just disorganised and you know doesn't care enough to get their child in on time, maybe then you should fine them. But I think the first step should be
all parents are disorganised. We're all disorganised. That's no excuse.
Well,
no excuse.
Well, then I think, you know, if we were all in the same boat, then you should be, you know, like there should be a little bit of understanding.
Yeah, a little bit of understanding, but you've got to get your kids to school. It comes with the territory. It comes with having kids. It's a pain, but you've got to get up and get them to school. I'm sorry.
Dan, if you're not getting your kids to school on time, I think the first question that the school should ask is why. They should ask why. Is there something wrong, you know, before they just whack a 60 quid fine on the parent. That seems a bit steep to me.
Final thought, Dan?
No, like I said, get your kids to school.
Get your
kids to
school.
It's not really, isn't
What about get your kids to school and have a little bit more understanding, bring them together? Dan and Ellie, great to
compromise.
see you
That's
both.
A crazy
compromise.
idea.
It's compromise.
It'll never catch up.
Many thanks. We'll see you in the next half an hour or so. Stay with us on Sky News. Lots more to come, including more pressure on the local council and the government over the Grenfell Tower fire. Do stay with us for that.